Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Golsided, another Chivas edition of Golsided. Your boy Omar here. I'm going to be giving you guys a preview of Chivas' matchups at the League's Cup. I'm going to be giving you guys a prediction of how their performance will go, and I'm going to be recapping the two matches that they've had so far in Liga MX. So a whole bunch to talk about. Let's get into it. So the first matchup against León, Chivas came out for their first game of the season in week 2 after the first game being suspended or postponed until September against Tigres because the field wasn't ready yet to play at home. We got confirmed what we all thought was that Gabriel Milito was going to play a 3-4-2-1. Some surprises, though. He did kind of go out with the similar lineup that he did towards the end of the preseason, which was a bit confusing. I thought, and a lot of us thought, that Gabriel Milito was just kind of testing certain players, not necessarily going to start them, but he did start off with two of his center backs being what I thought were our center mids, Luis Romo and Aguirre, along with Castillo, who is a tried and true center back. So a bit of an interesting back line. The center mid could be also a bit interesting. Omar Govea starting in the mid, who is a bit surprising after some pretty weak performances in the past. Guti, the Capitan, as center mid. Made sense. Brian Gonzalez and Richie Ledesma, the two wingers, which I think are the most solid positions that Chivas have. They had some great performances in the first 2 weeks. They're pretty high flying. They're the only ones out there on the wings. So far, so good, I would say. Alan Pulido, a bit surprising, not at the 9, but rather playing a little bit more supporting. Drops a lot, isn't necessarily always in the box. Piojo Alvarado, a bit more central, but does work out. Overall, solid performances from Piojo, but I think leaves a lot to be desired. And then, like I mentioned, Cade Cowell up top. I think it a bit difficult for him to keep that spot once the big games come. There's going to be a lot asked of him, and he has players like La Hormiga breathing down his neck to get some of those minutes. So in this match, I think a lot of folks were pretty upset at the refs. There were some really controversial calls pretty early on. Jose Castillo gets kind of cleated in the head inside of the box. It could have easily been a red card. A lot of people saying it should have gone to VAR. I think even on Twitter, people were saying that there should have been some direction from VAR to call the ref and to get some form of a card, probably a red card, which would have conditioned the game for the rest of the time. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Chivas overall had a pretty solid game. Chivas kind of starting how they finished last season, having trouble scoring goals on demand and creating those solid opportunities. According to all the apps, Luis Romo got the player of the match. He did have a really solid game. He is playing pretty well there at the center back position. A lot of people forget that he debuted in Primera División as a center back with Querétaro back in the day. And he was just so talented that Vucetich and the other coaches that were there at Querétaro, after Jimmy Lozano debuted him, they started moving him forward a little bit, and he ended up playing center defensive mid and then center mid and then basically anywhere box to box. He does a really good job there, but he was at fault for the goal. He had a pretty boneheaded move to leave the ball in the box. And I think it was Jose Castillo who ended up fouling the León attacker, which ended up in the penalty. But on Luis Romo, like I mentioned, he's in a 3 center back line. Him and Aguirre are center mids. I'm a little bit more hesitant when they start playing against some tougher teams, maybe even in League's Cup, because we know MLS is usually a bit more physical than the Liga MX teams. I'm a little bit nervous to see how they hold up when they start playing some big body forward. If you're not a pure center back and you don't have the physicality, you could get beaten a little bit in the box. And it seems like Milito is putting just as many ball playing players as possible. With this lineup, there's no more of those big, heavy, just booted out center back. Everybody on the pitch here is able to control the ball. And sometimes it kind of gets mixed up. You see Luis Romo up top. You see Aguirre moving up. Milito's trying something different, trying to be a little bit fluid, but I'm just a bit nervous that it could not pay off against tougher teams. The only other thing to call out, Tala Rangel is probably going to be a theme for these two matches right now because he's in the limelight right now. Luis Angel Malagon isn't doing the best of a job with America. He's leaving a lot on the table. Things are up for grabs. Unfortunately, this isn't the best goalkeeper core that Mexico's had, so I don't see the competition being too tight, but if Tala Rangel wants to push for that spot against Malagon, he has to have some baller performances. In this match, he had a pretty good performance, but he does face 2 penalties and he doesn't stop any of them. So I think there are some notes for Tala for him to take back to the drawing board. But overall in this match, I think a little bit disappointing result for the performance that Chivas put out. It was their first game of the season. There was some rust to brush off. León did have a game before. First official game under Milito, and they take an L. Thankfully, Fernando Beltran just didn't score and celebrate against them. And the last controversial call, not to say that I'm making excuses, but there was a no penalty call at the very last play of the game. La Hormiga comes off the bench, which I think is a good thing to highlight. The very last play of the game, a ball goes up in the air. Everyone's heading towards the ball, and Guti gets completely trucked by a León defender. The ref doesn't mark it because there's so much going on. The ball almost goes in. I think La Hormiga basically tries to knock. I think La Hormiga almost knocks it in, and then the defender kicks it off the post and it goes out. The ref doesn't mark anything, doesn't check VAR. Twitter's on fire because of that, and I think people are even saying that the ref should have been suspended or penalized for bad decision making in this case. A couple things just to call out is good. Like I mentioned, the 2 wingers I think are awesome. Richie Ledesma getting some great minutes in and really going high up the pitch. I think that is amazing. He just got to get used to it with Piojo, because Piojo goes out wide a lot, and if you have a wing back that goes that far up, I think they just kind of got to get used to the space and work together to get some really good crosses up. On the other side, Cotorro also gives Chivas a lot of width. I think Chivas are completely set on the wings. And then off the bench, I think Chivas has some really solid options. It's going to raise a lot of questions for Milito now going to Leagues Cup about who's the actual starter. A lot of young subs too. La Hormiga coming off the bench and providing an immediate spark in this game. And we'll talk about the next one in a second. Efrain Alvarez being the most talented by far that Chivas has available, but getting minutes off the bench, hitting one off the post at the very end of the game in this one. Like I said, raising a lot of questions. Should Cade Cowell be there? Should Pulido be the 9? Should Hormiga be the 9? Should Efrain Alvarez get every minute possible? So let's move on to the game against San Luis. Chivas wins a big thriller 4-3. The exact same starting 11. Apparently, equipo que pierde tampoco se toca. The same 3 center back line with 2 center mids in Romo and Aguirre. Chivas start off high flying. They get 2 goals pretty early on. They get an own goal, the Sarabia, which was basically Richie Ledesma's goal. And then right before the half, they get a locker room goal. Cade Cowell with a pretty heads-up play. Piojo Alvarado, who's not getting a lot of credit for what he's doing. I'm even hating on him. I'll continue to hate on him because I need him to get more assists and more shots on goal, that hopefully more goals. But Piojo with a heads-up play himself off of a corner, gets a little short play, chips it to Aguirre, who ends up getting a recentro with a header, and Cade Cowell, right place, right spot, right time, and puts it away right before the half. So 2-0 Chivas. We're all riding high. But in the second half, it's a completely different story. Within 5 minutes, a corner kick of their own. San Luis gets a beautiful header in. Aguila, who's one of the players that Chivas was trying to get in the offseason. Really good center back prospect, de San Luis. He gets a header over Guti. Guti loses his mark, and he puts a header right past Talarangel in between his hands, right above him. Talarangel needing to do well at the things that Luis Angel Malagon doesn't, and that he should have an advantage of, but unfortunately in this game gets exposed a little bit. About 15 minutes later, Chivas is needing to really buckle down and just kind of park the bus, honestly, try to get those 3 points. But on a breakaway, Guti is running back with Joao Pedro, the Walmart version of Joao Pedro, and he gets a pull of the jersey. They both go down in the box. Penalty for San Luis. 2 mistakes by Guti lead to 2 goals. And then again, Joao Pedro, this European striker, same as last week, James Rodriguez, European career, really good penalty kick takers. They both completely fooled Tala. In my opinion, one thing that Tala needs to work on as well. If he can be a really big, confident keeper with penalty kicks, I think that's another point that will have on Malagon that he can try to sneak in. At that point, Chivas fans are sweating bullets. We're like, what the hell's going on? This reminds us of last season. This reminds us of under Gago. This reminds us of all of the past trauma that we've had with these players. And then 6 minutes later, Benjamin Galdames, the dual national Argentino-Mexicano that's kind of going under the radar, playing there at San Luis. He gets a ball crossed over to him, and he gets a little bit of a dink header over Talarangel. It looks a little bit embarrassing how easy of a header that is right over Tala. And it's 3-2 at that point. Chivas is falling apart. Thankfully, the super subs come in, the same ones that did in the match against León, La Hormiga. We got got Camberos off the bench to provide a spark. We got Efrain Alvarez. We got Alan Mozo even coming in and giving his 2 cents in the game. So every single player that came off the bench basically providing a great spark, which is going to be something big for Milito. Like, are these guys great bench players, or are they meant to be your starters? And will they give you that quality 70 minutes a game starting? But we get some immediate impact in the 84th minute. 9 minutes later, Alan Mozo makes a great run up the side on one of his adventures. He gets one of those lazy crosses in that has no curl to it. It's just got like a little bit of a floater to it. It gets a couple of bounces before it gets to La Hormiga. And La Hormiga, out of nowhere, goes like prime R9 Ronaldo and gets a beautiful deflection header. Puts it right past Andres Sanchez. And we're back in the game, 3-3 with 6 minutes left. Anyone's game at that point. Chivas has got the momentum. We're looking a lot better. And there's some young energy in the game. And then 5 minutes later, right before the end of the game, Luis Romo from the center back position, which is, I guess, a huge benefit that we'll have if he stays there. He gets a beautiful ball in behind the line to Efrain Alvarez. Efra takes the whole San Luis back line to their goal line, gets an amazing cutback and takes out 2 players. And La Hormiga, again, prime R9, prime Chicharito before all this misogynistic shit. He takes like 3 steps back and he gets an amazing ball right to his foot, and he puts it away with his left. Amazing to see those players come in with that hunger off the bench and trying to get some more minutes, especially when their starters aren't doing that job. Let's start off with some good stuff. The good, I would say 100% it's got to be the bench. Every single player that came off the bench wants more minutes, wants to start. And I think Efrain Alvarez has got to start every single game. I think La Hormiga has a really good case to start over Cade Cowell. If we're saying that Alan Pulido for sure is a false 9. I think he has him as a false 9 because Cade Cowell is a little bit more dangerous speed-wise behind the lines. La Hormiga, if you guys watched the game, if you guys have seen him in the past 2 years, he's a rocket. He's so fast. His pace is crazy. I think he can fill that same role, but he's so much better technically. He has much better spatial awareness. He seems to got that Chicharito Canterano vibe to him. His soccer IQ is just at a whole different level. That TISM is working wonders for him. It's killer. I love it. So more good. The first half of Talarangel, I thought he had some great saves. At the end of the game, he had some great saves. So he was able to secure the win, keep us at a clean sheet at first, and then bring us on home to win the game at the end. He just had a really like sloppy window, which I think is always going to be there in the back of our heads. This is another game where he eats 3+ goals. So I think he's just got to kind of clean stuff up. I think he's got to work on his aerial game. Like I was mentioning, Malagon sucks at that. He can't also suck at that. He's 6'2". He's like 4 inches taller than Malagon. He has to have that in his bucket as like his big plus. Aerial game, if he can get better at penalties, being that big monster that is just a physical being at keep, can always get him to sneak in to the 2026 World Cup as a starter. Luis Romo and Daniel Aguirre, there are center backs, but they were really involved in the game. I'm assuming that's what Milito wanted. 2 center backs that can be ball playing, that can be really involved. Like I mentioned before, if they play against Cruz Azul, if they play against America, who have really strong strikers up top, really strong wingers, I think that's going to be the big test for these guys because they're not naturally set to stand and defend for 90 minutes. And if we don't have the possession, that can be a really, really nerve-wracking time. So Chivas get 3 points out of the 6 possible. 1 game in hand. We're not looking too bad. In 12th place with 3 points, but if they win it, they get 6 points. That's all the way up to 2nd place, depending on the goal differential. So not a bad start for Chivas. Gabriel Milito gets his first win before a big tournament break. So I think that calms the tabloids a little bit. Should calm his head going into those games. Hopefully Chivas can get some good performances in that tournament, so there's no ghosts there in the background coming back that like, hey, you already failed at something, now how are you going to do for the rest of the season? So I think this break comes at a good time right after the first win. Hopefully Chivas can heat up in this basically knockout tournament format and do really well in the league this year. So let's get into it. I mentioned to you guys, I'll give you guys some predictions about Leagues Cup. Just for a bit of the format of the Leagues Cup, there's a new format this year. There's an overall table for Liga MX and there's an overall table for MLS. Every team on each side has 3 matches to play cross league. It's the top 18 teams that made the playoffs from MLS against all 18 teams from Liga MX. So there's no San Jose Earthquakes, unfortunately. My local team sucks. Every team plays 3 cross league matchups, and then that creates a point system just within your leagues. And the top 4, only the top 4 out of those 18 make it to a knockout round. And that knockout round moving forward is Liga MX against MLS, Liga MX against MLS, and so on. So a lot of cross-league matchups the whole way. And I think it's kind of trying to avoid like past years where it's been MLS teams at the semifinals and MLS teams at the final guaranteed, right? So we'll see if Liga MX teams bring all the firepower, if they bring all the intensity that we see in CONCACAF Champions Cup. I know that they get home games, that usually helps, right? But if, in all honesty, if we're being real, if Liga MX really does dominate, they should be able to turn it on and win one of these tournaments at some point, even if it's all in U.S. soil. They're usually home teams wherever they play. Chivas is selling out every stadium that they play. So there's no reason why they shouldn't. Chivas in Leagues Cup, I've been seeing a lot of people being like, we got to make it to the playoffs, to the knockout rounds for the first time. Chivas has never actually won a game in Leagues Cup. In the past 2 instances, which have been the 2 like new format official versions of the tournament, they've lost. In 2023, they lost the 2, and then in 2024 last year, they tied both, and then they ended up losing in penalties in both. So in 2023, we had Paunovic. It was right after they had that humongous loss against Tigres, where we all know what happened. They ended up bottling it after being up 2-0 in the final. The first match they played against Cincinnati, and they lost 3-1. Brandon Vasquez scored a hat trick. The game was delayed because of lightning or something, and they ended up playing at a closed stadium the next day. But Chivas was completely in shambles after that disastrous performance in Liga MX. They were going from title contenders to now like completely embarrassing, completely torn locker room. I remember Alexis Vega being pissed off as hell, coming off the bench in the first match. I don't know. It seemed like Chivas kind of underestimated Cincinnati. And then they had to play Kansas City. They lost 1-0 against Kansas City with all of the starters in. They look overpowered. They did not look good in either of these matches. They only scored 1 goal, and it was the first play back from that weather delay. Pollo Briseño off the bench gets a flick header. That was the only goal that they scored and the only life that they showed. Completely shocked by MLS overall. In 2024, they played against the Earthquakes against LA Galaxy. They had Fernando Gago as their coach at that point. They came here to the Bay Area at Levi's Stadium. They played against the Quakes. Cade Cowell was coming back for the first time since being bought by Chivas. They go down 1-0. Bobasi, our striker here in San Jose, scores a header. And then I think Piojo scores a beautiful goal right before the game ends. They go to penalties. And then Cade Cowell ends up missing a penalty against his hometown team, against his old team. And we end up going home, and Chivas ends up losing that off of that penalty. Then they had to win against LA Galaxy to move forward, or at least win in penalties. They end up tying that game. Alan Mosso scores a freaking wonder goal out of nowhere. Paintsill scores for LA Galaxy off of like a beautiful Ricky Puig play. And then they go to penalties, and then they lose there too. Tiva Sepulveda has a freaking stinker of a match on the goal play, and then he also misses his penalty when he had that Batman mask. So completely terrible performance from Chivas in that tournament as well. They got knocked out. So back-to-back Leagues Cups where they just completely embarrassed. Now is a new tournament, new coach, new momentum, especially after 2 pretty good games, 1 great game this last time showing a lot of resilience. This time around, they play 3 games against New York Red Bulls, who is 10th place in MLS. They play against Charlotte FC, who is 7th in the East. And then they play against Cincinnati, who is 2nd overall in the league. So some tough matchups. In my opinion, no real stinker matchups, like easy, we got this. So let's get into them. The first match against New York Red Bulls is this Thursday. They've only had 1 win in June and July, but they have some superstar names. Like they have Emil Forsberg, who y'all know from fucking Leipzig or wherever the hell he was before, or some other Red Bull team. He's got 9 goals, 6 assists on the season, so he's balling out. That dude's going to be a really tough assignment for our center mid, especially Guti, who's just fouling people left and right and losing marks at the moment. So I think it's going to be a huge task for Guti to really turn it on and help out there. And then they got Choupo-Moting, who is 13 goals, 1 assist on the season, one of the top goal scorers in the league. This is one of those assignments that I'm mentioning to you guys that I think is going to be really difficult for Luis Romo and Aguirre, who are not everyday center backs, especially not Aguirre. He's for sure not your typical 6'4", tough as nails center back that's going to clear every ball. So if he has to stay back and defend, I can see that being very difficult. Maybe in this match, Milito brings in Tiba, which would be scary. Maybe he brings in the Ocampillo to help out back there. But I think it's just going to test that back line a lot, test Milito's system a lot. Maybe he moves back to a 4-5-1, a 4-2-3-1, something along those lines, a little bit more traditional. This, in theory, being the easiest matchup that Chivas has as far as their standings go. I think Chivas has to win this match. They also have to get some momentum going into the other 2 matches, because we've seen historically if they don't win the first one, it doesn't look like they're going to win any. In this case, it's only going to get harder each matchup that they go. So they got to draw some blood in that first match. They got to fill out that stadium in New York. There's a lot of Chivas fans there. And then August 3rd, they play against Charlotte. Charlotte has won 4 games in a row. They haven't lost at all in the month of July. They have Wilfried Zaha, everyone knows him, 5 goals, 6 assists. Pep Biel, some random Spanish dude, has got 10 goals, 11 assists. So, again, big matchups for the center mids there with Pep Biel. And then Zaha on the wing. That's going to be, I think, just as tough as the striker conversation we're having, because that's going to tie down Cotorro. That's going to tie down Richie Ledesma to not attack so much, because we know Zaha's not going to go down and defend. He's just going to be attacking the whole time. And if those guys are up, that means Aguirre or Jose Castillo have got to kind of go man-to-man against a couple of these guys. Those aren't conversations I want to be having. The big weakness for Charlotte is definitely the back line. They got Tuiloma. They got like a New Zealand center back. I think they have some heavy legs back there. So I think that's where Chivas has got to expose them. At this point, I think we got to be giving Efrain Alvarez every minute. We got to give Hormiga every minute. Try them out in some of these games. That's what they're there for. Use those fresh legs to try to outrun this back line and get some goals. At this point, Chivas has got to be aiming for 2 wins in a row there, because the last matchup against Cincinnati is going to be close to impossible. It's going to be very difficult. Cincinnati, like I mentioned, just until this last week where they lost a game, they were first place in the East, first place overall in MLS. A really well-worked team. Their defense is killer. They got Matt Miazga, Miles Robinson, Luca Orellano. They have amazing back line. I don't really love their strikers. They got Kamara up there, who's a bit past his prime and like a 20-year-old youngster. But they make it work attacking, and they have Evander, probably the MVP frontrunner, helping attack the whole way. So it's really balanced. And I think this is one of those teams, just like against Cincy 2 years ago when they had Lucho Acosta and Brandon Vasquez, this could be one of those games where Chivas doesn't see the ball a lot. They could get overpowered. So I think Chivas has got to get the points from the first 2 matchups. And then this match against Cincinnati, let it be a no-stress match and go all out to try to win the game, try to play against tough teams and build your system. But I would not go into this matchup against Cincinnati saying that this is where we're going to get our points to move on. That's a death wish. My predictions for Chivas, I think it could fluctuate a little bit here. My predictions would be 7 points. I think that's pretty optimistic. I think they can 100% beat New York Red Bulls. I think if you expose that back line, Chivas should get 3 points from Charlotte. That's 6 points. And then I think they could get a draw against Cincinnati. But what I mean by fluctuating is that I think it can go pretty wild the other way, where I think on the low end, Chivas can get 4 points. I think they can get the win against New York Red Bulls. And then if they have a really tough time with Zaha and some of those players of Charlotte, they can get the 1 point. That doesn't get you on. I don't think that'll get you to the top 4 in this entire tournament. I don't see Chivas getting a perfect 9 out of this. That Cincinnati match is just way too tough. 7 points, I think, would get you really close to the top 4. Maybe goal differential helps you out there, unless 4 Chivas teams go perfect. 9 points, which I think is going to be a bit tough. We'll see if Milito has any trouble adjusting to the MLS style of play. To my understanding, he doesn't have any experience against them, but I can see this being a really big turning point for Chivas, coming off that big win against San Luis, getting some momentum, going to this tournament, getting some momentum out of playing MLS teams, hopefully moving on to the next round, which would be pretty big since Chivas hasn't even won a game. And then coming back to Liga MX, which is the more important thing. I know you get a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot winning this tournament, but it's really difficult to do, especially with this new format where there's only 4 teams from each league that make the playoff. I think that's going to be very difficult to do. So yeah, folks, those are my predictions. You guys let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Give me your guys' predictions. Let me know your thoughts about the recap of the games. Who were your standout players? Who are you looking forward to in the season? Are you guys going out to any of the games in the U.S.? You guys let me know. Let us know in the Discord. Let's keep chopping it up, and we'll talk soon. Peace.